Welcome to News 9 Live, and you are watching On Point with me. In this edition, we will discuss Prime Minister Modi's landmark visit to Ukraine. Prime Minister Narendra Modi met the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Friday in Kyiv in a historical visit. Prime Minister Modi spoke to President Zelenskyy and assured him that India is committed to peace and ready to play the role of a peacemaker. Modi also pointed out that India has always stood with humanity and has never been neutral during war and always been on the side of peace. He highlighted the fact that India respects Ukraine's sovereignty. Prime Minister Modi added that the only way to resolve the conflict is through dialogue and diplomacy, and I must put this on record that India's Prime Minister is perhaps one of the few premiers who has not only gone to Moscow but also to Kyiv, and India's first Prime Minister to be in the war zone. Let's listen in to Narendra Modi.
हम बहुत ही कन्विक्शन के साथ युद्ध से दूर रहे हैं, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि हम तटस्थ थे, हम न्यूट्रल नहीं थे। हम पहले दिन से ही पक्षकार रहे हैं और हमारा पक्ष है शांति का। हम बुद्ध की धरती से आते हैं जहां युद्ध को कोई स्थान नहीं होता है। हम महात्मा गांधी की धरती से आते हैं जिसने पूरे विश्व को शांति का संदेश दिया है। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आज जब यूक्रेन आया हूं तब मैं 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की भावना को लेकर के आया हूं, और 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की भावना मानवता से प्रेरित है, और मैं आज यूक्रेन की धरती पर शांति का संदेश लेकर के आया। एक्सेलेंसी, यहां से पहले मैंने ग्लोबल साउथ की कॉन्फ्रेंस की, करीब 120 देश के लोग थे। मैं उनकी तरफ से भी शांति का संदेश लेकर के आया। एक्सेलेंसी, आप भली भांति जानते हैं, यूक्रेन के लोग भी भली भांति जानते हैं कि शांति के हर प्रयास में भारत का सक्रिय योगदान रहा है, और आप भली भांति जानते हैं कि हमारा अप्रोच पीपल सेंट्रिक रहा है। और मैं आपको भी और पूरे विश्व समुदाय को विश्वास दिलाना चाहता हूं, और वो भारत का कमिटमेंट है, और हम स्पष्ट मानते हैं कि संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता का सम्मान हमारे लिए सर्वोपरि है। हम उसका समर्थन करते हैं। कुछ समय पहले समरकंद में जब राष्ट्रपति पुतिन से मिला था, तब मीडिया के सामने आंख से आंख मिला करके मैंने उनको कहा था कि ये युद्ध का समय नहीं है। मैं पिछले दिनों रशिया के मुलाकात के लिए गया था, वहां भी मैंने साफ साफ शब्दों में अपनी बात कही है कि किसी भी समस्या का समाधान रणभूमि में कभी भी नहीं होता है। समाधान का रास्ता बातचीत से ही निकलता है, डायलॉग से निकलता है, डिप्लोमेसी से निकलता है, और हमने बिना समय गंवाए उस दिशा में आगे बढ़ना चाहिए। दोनों पक्षों को साथ बैठ करके इस संकट की घड़ी से बाहर निकलने के रास्ते तलाशने होंगे। एक्सेलेंसी, आज हम जब रूबरू मिल रहे हैं तब मैं यूक्रेन की धरती पर, और आप जब मैं बच्चों की शहादत को, उस जगह को देखकर के आया और मेरा मन भरा हुआ है, तब मैं आज आपसे शांति की ओर आगे बढ़ने के मार्ग पर विशेष रूप से चर्चा करना चाहूंगा। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाना चाहता हूं कि शांति के हर प्रयास में भारत अपनी सक्रिय भूमिका निभाने के लिए तैयार है। व्यक्तिगत रूप से मैं भी अगर इसमें कोई योगदान कर सकता हूं तो मैं जरूर करना चाहूंगा। एक मित्र के रूप में मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूं।
President Zelenskyy also said that he and Prime Minister discussed summit on peace and added that trade and military cooperation between the two countries should be strengthened.
Dear Mr. Prime Minister Modi, it is a great honor for us to meet in Ukraine the Prime Minister of India, friendly India, in Ukraine on the day of our national flag. It is very symbolic, because it is a historic moment. This is the first visit of India's Prime Minister to an independent Ukraine on the eve of Independence Day. This visit is really friendly, important for all the Ukrainians. I want to personally thank India's Prime Minister for starting his visit with commemorating killed Ukrainian children that were killed by the Russian army. They killed the children with their aggression. I am very thankful for this commemoration of Ukrainian children. As of today, we signed 4 documents with the Indian side during this historic visit of Prime Minister Modi. The documents concern medical area, agrarian cooperation, humanitarian relations, also culture. We prepared a joint statement after the PM's visit regarding the development of strategic cooperation between our countries, trade between our countries, and military cooperation. All of it should strengthen. I am very thankful for it. I am happy to see you. Glory to Ukraine.
And now let me introduce my guest, Aditya Rajkol, Executive Editor, Strategic Affairs and National Security, with me in studio. Vlada Galan, President and Chairman, the Board of International Ukrainian Crisis Fund. And Velina Zhagroka, Geopolitical Expert. She joins me live from Vienna. And let me straight away go to Velina first. Thank you so much for joining us. How would you sum up this short meeting which Prime Minister Modi had with Zelenskyy?
We've heard already from the report, this is a historic visit, but it is not just a historic visit. And it's not only about optics, obviously, it's about outcomes. From defense cooperation to humanitarian support, India is playing a pivotal role in shaping the region's relations, but also concretely in shaping also the peace negotiation efforts when it comes to coming closer also to the Ukrainian position, hearing the Ukrainian position directly from President Zelenskyy. So what we are seeing here, in my view, is a concrete example of this multi-layered foreign policy of India, and also trying to reach out to both sides and trying to bridge both sides and understand the position. So I have been arguing that India is probably right now the only geopolitical bridge builder in the world, operating with both sides. And this is a concrete example how this is being done.
Vlada, this meeting had 2 very important takeaways. The first was Prime Minister Modi visiting and paying homage to the children who died when he was in Moscow. That's one. And the second part is Prime Minister saying that he told this to Putin that he stands for peace. Do you think it's a good start? Because right now the outcomes are not on table. The bilaterals are on table. Do you think it's a good start, a strong messaging?
It's absolutely a good start. And at the end of the day, India has acted as an economic lifeline for Russia. They've ramped up purchases of its crude oil after many countries around the world slapped sanctions on Moscow. Who better to speak to Putin than Prime Minister Modi? He finds himself in a very unique position. Russia does not respect Western nations. Macron made many attempts. Those attempts led us nowhere. And I truly believe that Prime Minister Modi finds himself in a very unique position due to the dependent relationship that Russia also has on India.
Aditya, do you think was it a balancing act which the Prime Minister did between Russia and Ukraine? Or do you think that there is a possibility for an Indian mediation? And third thing, because you have done war reporting, how often do you think that the soft diplomacy can create solutions when it comes to hard issues like war?
You know, at the peak of the war, I would be skeptical, I would be apprehensive, I won't be so sure that there would be end results. But we are at a stage, Karthikeya, where there is, as we discussed yesterday, exhaustion, there is fatigue, there is, a lot of pressure on several countries. The economy also suffering in many ways. Connectivity has been suffering globally. And that's why there is a way out that both sides seem to be looking for. There's no way out right now, but there could be a possibility of a way out in near future. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and India from the day one of the war have been saying that we will not side with one side or the other. Today, Prime Minister said something very interesting. He said that you can't accuse me of being neutral. I am not neutral. I am on the side of peace. India from day one has said that peace, diplomacy, negotiation is the only way forward. And I completely agree with Valina when she says that India is perhaps the only country in the world which has not chosen a side, but in fact is a bridge builder. How much India will succeed or how much those who are on the side of peace and diplomacy will succeed, only days ahead will say. But today is a remarkable and a historic day. When a BBC reporter in fact asked Jaishankar that, there were a lot of people here who are upset with your, embrace towards Putin, those visuals of Modi and Putin hugging each other, this was something that the BBC reporter asked Jaishankar. And there was a solid response that came in from India's External Affairs Minister that, you can't accuse of this. We seem to have a cultural difference. In our part of the world, in India, we embrace each other whenever people to people, there's a dialogue or people meet each other. And today we witnessed the same embrace, the same hug when Zelenskyy, in fact, met Prime Minister Modi. In fact, one of the only world leaders that I've seen was very emotional. If you see Zelenskyy's face while meeting Prime Minister Modi, he was very emotional. He was perhaps, expecting that Modi will perhaps not find a way out, but perhaps begin that kind of a peace process. And I think today with Prime Minister Modi reflecting and again giving a call for peace, saying that I come from a land of Buddha, I come from the land of Mahatma Gandhi, we are votaries of peace, is something remarkable. I really hope that there's an end result. I quite
agree with you, and it must have been a strong decision on part of the Prime Minister's office actually, because when he was in Moscow, that attack took place in which children died.
Yes.
So when he goes to Ukraine, he in fact pays homage to the children.
Yes.
I think it's a very strong messaging. I think it's a morally right thing to do, even at cost of other political things, that he has paid homage to a dastardly attack which led to death of so many innocent lives. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar also addressed a press conference. He spoke on the issue of bilaterals. Let's take a sense of what these 4 agreements were about.
In the discussion, obviously, a significant part of it was devoted to our bilateral relations. There was a discussion about trade, economic issues, defense, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, education. There were a whole lot of issues. You will see much of that reflected in the joint statement, which has been released already, or will be released very shortly. The leaders also, I must share with you, tasked the Intergovernmental Commission, of which Minister Kuleba and I are the co-chairs, to specifically focus on rebuilding our trade and economic relations, which had gone down in recent times. And we certainly look forward to having early meeting of that body, definitely by the end of this year.
Valina, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi, we are not neutral, but we have a position. How would the Ukrainians look at it from their perspective, the perspective from Kyiv? Because a country in a war is also a country in a need.
Well, obviously from Ukrainian perspective, this is also a historic visit. And it is a historic visit for several reasons. Now, the most important one is that President Zelenskyy, Foreign Minister Kuleba, and their teams will have the opportunity, and they had, in fact, the opportunity to convey their message and, their version of what's going on the ground firsthand. I think this is immensely important in the context of an ongoing war. And Prime Minister Modi was able to understand the other side, because we know for a fact that his first official visit was in Moscow after the inauguration. So now he knows both sides. He will be able to also identify, let's say, points of intersection. You already mentioned, and this is the second important point, there are also ripple effects from the ongoing war when it comes to global commodities, when it comes to common goods, when it comes to supply chains. And here we have food and energy commodity insecurities. We have inflationary impact from the ripple effects from the from the supply chains being also in disarray, and a lot of other issues, humanitarian issues, where India could also contribute. So this is also, in my view, a very important point. Third important point is that India sent a representative to the peace conference in Switzerland. This was the first Western coordinated effort to initiate a peace process. In the future, we know for a fact that this war will have to end with peace agreement and certainly with negotiation agreement. And, India wants to have its own fact-finding mission, its own version of the story. And this peace conference is to be seen in series of conferences in the future. I suppose that there will be also other conferences, for instance, proposed by China, by Brazil, where India once again, as I mentioned previously, will be part of. And at some point in the future, these two different initiatives will have to merge into, let's say, individual or single event, hopefully as soon as possible. And I would argue that here India may play more important role, again, as this bridge builder of the positions of the currently diametrically opposed positions of Russia and Ukraine. At some point of time in the future, they have to sit together at a negotiation table. But then, of course, there is also this understanding, and Ukraine understands that very well. The strategic partnership between Russia and India is a fact, it's a geopolitical and geoeconomic fact, and it's here to stay. So how to actually use niches, how to use opportunities instead of focusing on the problems. I think that here, especially when it comes to strategic military necessity, India's reliance on Russian defense manufacturers is far too overwhelming. And now Ukraine could be one of the solutions. The very fact that this agreement was also signed, I think, points to that direction.
I have a point here, and on this, I would like Vlada to come in. Sometimes people see in the West that the India's excess or its strategic partnership with Russia as a burden, but sometimes excess is also leverage.
The relationship between India and Russia goes back for many, many years. And it is exactly that relationship and India being the largest purchaser of Russian oil, just surpassing China, that exactly gives it that leverage to be able to be a trusted and honest broker to negotiate between the two countries. And Zelenskyy and Kyiv officials have urgently been working to expand the global backing for their peace formula. And this peace formula is primarily predicated on the withdrawal of Russian troops from their land. Prime Minister Modi making this trip sends a huge signal to the world. And as you rightly commented, it was incredibly emotional for President Zelenskyy. I mentioned that I was in Kyiv when the Children's Hospital was hit. Prime Minister Modi is on the ground and is able to see these things firsthand for himself, the devastation and what is taking place. It is different than reading it off of a briefing report, and his motorcade certainly has passed that Children's Hospital. It is impossible to miss in the city of Kyiv as he's moving around the city. So the leverage that India has is immense, and it is due to their longstanding relationship and Russia's dependence to a degree on India being such a large oil purchaser.
From Ukraine or the political establishment in Ukraine expect bigger outcomes? Or do you think that the fact that this meeting took place, the fact that the Prime Minister made certain gestures, gave emphasis on certain words like that we are not neutral, is a good beginning enough?
It's a huge beginning, and expectations have been beyond met in the sense that Prime Minister Modi made this historic trip, being the first Indian Prime Minister to make a trip since Ukraine's independence. The expectations were met the minute he landed on the ground in Kyiv. And Modi and Zelenskyy have met twice in the past on the sideline of G7 summits since the start of the war, including in June, even in Italy. But this is very different, him being there. It'll be interesting to see what the takeaways are in the sense of what are the next steps and how Prime Minister Modi rises to this occasion of continuing being the peace negotiator. He's made a strong stand to say that he's very much involved. He is not standing on the sidelines, and he wants to see peace in the region. At the end of the day, this crisis has had significant impact on the global economy and Indian businesses that have not been immune to its effects. The conflict has caused disruptions in supply chains and input costs and increased demands for goods. So the global economy has been affected, which means that Indian businesses have a hard time planning for the future in circumstances like this. So Prime Minister Modi, first and foremost, has been for his people and for India, and has put India first, and bringing a resolution to this conflict aligns with those goals.
Aditya, will there be a burden of expectation? And secondly, a lot of critics see it as a balancing act, somehow to soothe and assuage the America and the Western allies, that yes, when we talk about strategic autonomy in context of Russians, it does not mean a bare embrace.
You know,
two questions to you.
many in the West would like to play this visit down, and many would like to say that, you know, this is perhaps only a balancing act. I don't see that through that prism. I see it beyond, the balancing acts of the world. India hasn't been balancing in the last 2.5 years, and I don't see a reason for them to balance now. At the peak of the war, when, it was expected that India would perhaps choose one side or the other, India stood its ground and said that we would choose whatever we think is best, and that is to stand for peace, stand for diplomacy, and stand against the war and against humanitarian crisis. On different times, the Prime Minister himself and the External Affairs Ministers has condemned violence, has condemned territorial aggression by the Russians. So you can't even blame India for not speaking up. India has spoken up. India has also proven on several multilateral forums that there needs to be a consensus. There need to be a global effort towards peacemaking. And that's what Prime Minister Modi also reflected today. So I feel to expect an outcome within 24 hours or within a few days is unreasonable, but there is a beginning that has been made. Okay. And this visit in itself, as Vlada also pointed out, is a great beginning. Prime Minister landing on the Ukrainian soil.
But burden of expectation?
That's okay. If a leader of one of the largest democracies in the world is visiting Ukraine at a time when there's this long war underway, of course there would be expectations. And it's good that there are expectations, but there is a step-by-step process in diplomacy. As I said, diplomacy is not instant noodles. Diplomacy takes time. And this diplomacy will also take time, especially when there's a war, when there's violence underway, not just in Ukraine and Russia, but in the Middle East as well. And perhaps there will be a middle ground, if not immediately, but in the next few months.
Very quickly, Valina, do you think what will be the Ukrainian expectation now, since the foundation have been laid?
Ukraine is currently, as it has been the case for more than 3 years now, only dealing with one issue, and that it's its very own survival. Now, that is the most important, of course, task for the Ukrainian leadership, for the Ukrainian population. And one of the key dimensions of this task is the international dimensions, finding partners. There are humanitarian issues, there are financial matters, having the opportunity to actually seal new deals, including in the key strategic field of the military domain, is an absolute game changer, I would argue, from Ukraine's perspective. because we talk about the fifth economic power in the world, projected to become economic world power number 3 with immense diplomatic portfolio and with this geopolitical omnidirectionality that I outlined for you. So I don't see, honestly, I don't see any burden of expectations on both sides. I think that both sides look at it as a win-win situation right now. India is one of the few countries in the world right now that actually can afford itself to go and to talk to all sides, contrary to most countries in the world which have taken a side. And in that matter, Ukraine can only gain from this visit, and same goes actually for India.
Vlada, this is to you. Again, is there going to be a burden of expectation? The reason why I'm asking is no one expects any one leader to have a say in this issue. Just because India is in a historical position as a growing economy, a leader who is respected in India, this is his third term, and someone who has the ability to be on the same page with Washington and Moscow on their own term is Prime Minister Modi. So, it makes the task tough, and it can also make the task slightly easier. But the issue is the focus remains on him.
All eyes are on India and on Modi right now during this visit. All eyes will be watching to see the next steps that take place. So certainly from the Ukrainian side, the Ukrainians and this visit has surpassed their expectations, the fact that Modi made the time and made the visit. But think of just simply the global significance. World War II Memorial in Ukraine was visited today by Modi and Zelenskyy. It's sad to think that 80 years after World War II, a time when the Russian army actually pushed back the invaders, today they are the invaders and the aggressors. How history has changed. The world is certainly watching. I think there is this desire for Modi to continue stepping up as an honest broker, to continue to perhaps usher a face-to-face dialogue between Zelenskyy and Putin. Modi has said that that would be very, very beneficial. And I tend to agree that before any conflict resolution can be reached, that has to take place. And I think that all eyes will certainly be on India, will certainly be on Modi moving forward to see if there continues to be progress in this direction.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aditya, Velina and Vlada, for joining me on this special edition of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Ukraine. It was historic. The first Prime Minister, Indian Prime Minister, to be in a war zone. And for Prime Minister Modi, if you ask me my take on the on point, for him to actually refer to that particular incident which happened when he was in Moscow, that what has happened was not correct, was wrong, and then to say that we are not neutral, I think is the most important reference point. The most important reference point of this visit, because he says, we are not neutral, we have a position, and I come from the land of Buddha.
We'll put new glasses in the window.